Today you must see your end!
It hurts! My stomach! Why, Master? We are in...
Unaware he was a kung fu master her daughter, in law, and friends mocked him until he fought. He stood quietly as they laughed, not knowing the man they mocked had once broken bones with bare hands. His daughter-in-law pointed at him first. Old, weak, useless, she said. Her friends joined in, circling him, filming, daring him to react. They thought he was just an ordinary old man, a burden, a joke. What they didn't know was that every scar on his body told a story. Every calm breath hid years of discipline, and every insult pushed him closer to a line he had sworn never to cross again. He had promised himself never to fight, never to return to that life, especially not in front of his family. But when one of them struck him and another grabbed his collar, something ancient woke up inside him. In one moment, the laughter stopped, the phones dropped, and the room went silent, because the man they mocked was a kung fu master. And what happened next? No one there will ever forget. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ocean of Tales. Kindly watch, comment, and subscribe on this channel. We will be grateful if you help us do this. We will be notifying you when we drop a new video. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Before we move to the main story, if today is your first time of watching our video, please subscribe. Morning heat pressed down on Lagos like a heavy palm as Leo stepped into the compound without announcement, the city's distant horns humming beyond the gate. Dust clung to his worn shoes, and sweat darkened the collar of his plain shirt, but his movements stayed calm, measured, almost ceremonial. Conversations paused only briefly before resuming with careless laughter. No one rose. No one greeted him properly. To them, he was just another aging man drifting through life, unnoticed and unnecessary. Leo felt it instantly, the quiet dismissal, the unspoken verdict, and chose silence, not knowing that silence was already being mistaken for weakness. Amina stood near the veranda with her friends, sunlight catching the gloss of her confidence as her eyes swept over Leo and hardened. She laughed first, sharp and loud, pointing him out like an object misplaced in the room. Her friends followed easily, their laughter bouncing off tiled walls and parked cars, growing bolder with every second. Leo felt the weight of their stares press into his back as he moved deeper inside, shoulders relaxed, face unreadable. They mistook his calm for surrender, unaware that every step he took was guided by restraint learned the hard way, restraint now quietly under siege. A chair scraped loudly as someone shifted for a better view, and the laughter grew more casual, more careless, like people joking at a stranger's expense on a bus. Leo set down the small bag he carried, fingers steady, eyes lowered, absorbing the insults without reaction. Inside, something stirred, not anger yet, but awareness, the kind that sharpens senses and slows time. He noticed everything, the rhythm of footsteps, the distance between bodies, the change in air when mockery turned personal. Still, he said nothing, even as curiosity flickered across faces wondering how long he would endure it. Amina's voice carried again, louder now, dripping with authority she assumed came with youth and status. Her laughter cut deeper because it came from inside the family circle, not strangers on the street. Leo felt the sting, not as pain, but as memory, of respect once given freely, of dignity earned through discipline, not volume. His jaw tightened briefly, then loosened. He adjusted his posture slightly, a habit from another life, unnoticed by everyone present. To them, he was shrinking. In truth, he was anchoring himself, bracing against something he prayed would not come next. Heat shimmered above the concrete as phones appeared, raised casually at first, lenses glinting like watchful eyes. Leo sensed it without turning, the moment humiliation shifted from private amusement to public spectacle. Laughter sharpened with the thrill of being seen, recorded, shared. The courtyard felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls leaned inward. Leo inhaled slowly, counting the breath, grounding himself in the present. He had survived worse rooms than this. Still, something about the ease of their cruelty unsettled him, as if fate itself was inching closer, waiting for the smallest excuse. A child ran past, barefoot and laughing, unaware of the tension coiling silently beneath the surface. Leo watched the dust rise behind the child's heels and felt a flicker of sadness pass through him. Once, he had believed peace could be permanent if protected carefully enough. He had believed distance from his past would keep it buried. Standing there now, surrounded by laughter that carried no kindness, he realized peace was fragile when respect vanished. His fingers curled briefly, then relaxed again, the muscles remembering movements his mind still refused to acknowledge. Movements that had consequences. The laughter peaked, careless and loud, as Leo finally lifted his eyes, scanning the faces around him with quiet clarity. No anger showed there, no threat, only a calm so deep it felt misplaced, unsettling. A hush almost followed, as if something invisible had shifted, but it passed quickly, replaced by another burst of mockery. Leo lowered his gaze once more, choosing silence again, even as something ancient stirred beneath his restraint. The mistake had already been made. They just didn't know it yet, and by the time they did, it would be far too late. Amina stepped forward as if the space belonged to her, heels tapping sharply against the concrete, claiming attention without asking for it. The Lagos sun lit her face, confident and unbothered, as she laughed again, this time slower, louder, more deliberate. Her words weren't shouted, yet they traveled far, riding on the ease of someone who believed she could say anything without consequence. Leo remained still, the faint hum of traffic beyond the gate filling the gaps between insults. The others watched closely, sensing that something was changing, though no one yet understood which direction it would go. Amina's mockery sharpened as she circled him, her tone shifting from playful to pointed, like a blade finding its edge. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged, dressing disrespect as honesty and cruelty as humor. Her friends nodded along, emboldened by her certainty, laughing as if approval was currency. Leo felt the heat of the moment rise against his skin, but his face stayed calm, eyes steady. What hurt wasn't the insult itself, it was the ease with which family loyalty had been replaced by dominance, and how quickly lines were being erased. The courtyard felt different now, heavier, as though the air itself had taken sides. Amina's laughter echoed again, louder than before, drawing attention from neighboring balconies and passing pedestrians. Leo shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that went unnoticed, yet it grounded him. He could feel the ground beneath his feet, solid and unforgiving. Every word she threw at him landed somewhere deeper than pride, touching a place where respect once lived. He wondered briefly how someone so young could carry such disregard so easily, and what it would cost her if that confidence cracked. Amina leaned closer, her voice dropping just enough to feel personal, intimate in its cruelty. The familiarity stung more than volume ever could. This wasn't public teasing anymore. It was an assertion of power within the family space, a declaration that hierarchy had shifted. Leo's breathing slowed further, each inhale controlled, measured. He had trained himself long ago to endure pressure without reaction, but this felt different. The disrespect wasn't accidental. It was intentional, rehearsed, sharpened by an audience eager to see how far she would go before something snapped. A ripple of laughter followed her words, but it sounded thinner now, strained, as if even her friends sensed the edge they were walking. Phones rose higher, framing Leo from every angle, capturing his stillness like proof of defeat. Amina smiled at the screens, basking in attention, unaware that she was recording her own recklessness. Leo felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not fear, but recognition, the quiet signal that restraint was being pushed too far. He remained silent, though the silence now carried weight, pressing back against her confidence. A breeze swept through the courtyard, lifting dust and cooling sweat-damp skin, momentarily breaking the tension. Leo's eyes flicked upward, meeting Amina's gaze for the first time. The look wasn't angry. It was steady, unsettling in its calm, like deep water that hides its depth. Amina faltered for half a second before laughing again, louder, as if to drown out that flicker of doubt. She mistook his gaze for surrender, not realizing it was assessment, distance, timing, intent, habits that never truly fade, no matter how long they sleep. Amina stepped back, clapping her hands mockingly, inviting more laughter, more attention, more noise. The crowd responded, though something in their energy had shifted, curiosity replacing pure amusement. Leo lowered his eyes again, choosing silence once more, but the choice felt heavier now, strained. The line between endurance and humiliation was thinning fast. As Amina prepared to say something sharper, something final, Leo sensed it clearly. The moment approaching when words would no longer be the most dangerous thing in the courtyard. And when that moment arrived, there would be no undoing it. A sudden burst of laughter rippled through the courtyard as more phones appeared, lifted high like trophies, their lenses glinting in the Lego sun. What had begun as mockery inside a family space now spilled outward, feeding on attention. Leo sensed the shift instantly, the way cruelty grows teeth when it knows it's being watched. The air tightened, buzzing with anticipation, as friends angled for better shots, whispering and giggling. He felt the weight of eyes pressing in from all sides, not just judging, but waiting, eager for a reaction they could capture and replay again and again. Amina moved confidently among them, gesturing, posing, directing the moment like a performance. Her laughter sounded brighter now, sharpened by the thrill of an audience beyond the compound walls. Leo stood at the center of it all, quiet, unmoving, his stillness becoming the joke itself. He noticed how quickly empathy vanished when a screen stood between people and consequence. Each raised phone widened the distance between dignity and humiliation, and he realized this wasn't just mockery anymore. It was a public verdict being recorded, sealed, and prepared for the world to consume. The sounds layered over each other. Laughter, passing traffic, distant horns, the faint buzz of notifications already chiming. Leo's senses sharpened, cataloging movement and space without conscious effort. He could feel the heat radiating from the concrete, the rough texture beneath his soles, the subtle shifts as people edged closer. Somewhere deep inside, a warning surfaced, quiet but insistent. He had seen crowds before. He had seen how quickly amusement could turn into something dangerous. Still, he remained still, knowing that once shame goes public, there is no clean way back. Amina raised her phone higher, angling it toward Leo's face, her smile wide and fearless. The gesture felt invasive, crossing a boundary words never could. Leo lifted his chin slightly, eyes meeting the camera for a brief moment. The laughter faltered, just for a second, as something unreadable passed through his gaze. Not anger, not fear, something calmer. He looked away again, but the moment lingered, unsettling. A few friends exchanged glances, sensing a shift they couldn't explain, even as the recording continued relentlessly. The courtyard seemed to shrink as the crowd tightened, excitement replacing caution. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else dared another insult. The energy tipped from playful to reckless. Leo's breathing slowed further, each inhale deliberate, each exhale controlled. He wasn't retreating inward. He was anchoring himself, preparing for balance. The humiliation pressed down harder now, not because of the words, but because of the permanence of being watched. He knew that whatever happened next would not stay contained within these walls, and that knowledge weighed heavily. A faint tremor of unease passed through the group as Leo shifted his stance slightly, feet adjusting on the concrete. It was a small movement, almost invisible, yet something about it quieted a few voices. Amina laughed it off quickly, mocking the silence before it could grow. Phones remained raised, hungry. Leo felt the familiar edge return, the thin line where patience ends and instinct begins. He had promised himself never to cross it again, but promises made in peace are fragile when dignity is stripped away in public. As laughter swelled once more, louder than before, Leo closed his eyes briefly, shutting out the noise, the cameras, the judgment. When he opened them, his expression was unchanged, but something beneath it had settled into place. The crowd mistook his calm for surrender, unaware that the stage they had created was about to host something far beyond entertainment. The phones kept rolling, capturing every second, unaware that they were recording the final moments before Shane changed direction, and before the balance of power flipped completely. The noise around Leo began to fade, not because it stopped, but because his mind pulled inward, retreating to a quieter place shaped by memory. The heat of Lagos blurred at the edges as the past crept in, not as images, but as weight. He remembered rooms filled with sweat and discipline, mornings that began before sunrise, and bodies pushed beyond limits. Fighting had once defined his days, carved strength into muscle and bone. It had also taken something from him that could never be recovered, and that loss whispered now, reminding him why he had chosen silence. A sound cut through the laughter, a sharp slap of hands clapping mockingly, and the present threatened to drag him back. Leo steadied himself, drawing a slow breath, counting the rise and fall of his chest. He remembered the promise he made the day he walked away, a promise sealed with pain and regret. Never again, he told himself. Not for pride. Not for ego. Not even for humiliation. That promise had guided him through years of anonymity, through ordinary days that felt safe precisely because they were quiet. The ground beneath Leo's feet felt solid, reassuring, as though anchoring him to the present while his thoughts drifted. He remembered the discipline that taught him restraint before power, control before speed. He had learned that the hardest fight was often the one avoided. The laughter around him felt distant now, like noise from another room, yet the tension remained, pressing against his resolve. He wondered if peace was something one truly earned, or merely something borrowed until tested. The question lingered, heavy and unresolved. Amina's voice cut through again, louder, sharper, dragging his attention back. Leo opened his eyes fully, focusing on the light, the dust, the faces. His heart remained steady, but his muscles held a quiet readiness he had tried to forget. The promise echoed in his mind, clashing with the present moment. He had believed that distance from his past would keep it buried, that time alone could soften what had once been honed to precision. Standing there now, he felt the truth pressing in. Some skills never truly leave you. A ripple of laughter surged, and Leo felt the subtle tightening in his jaw as memory and reality collided. He remembered the cost of fighting, the bruises that faded, and the ones that never did. He remembered the moment he chose peace, believing it would protect him and those around him. Yet here he stood, surrounded by mockery sharpened into cruelty, wondering if peace without respect was simply another form of surrender. The thought unsettled him more than any insult thrown his way. A breeze brushed his skin, carrying the faint scent of exhaust and dust, grounding him again. Leo shifted his shoulders slightly, easing tension without drawing attention. He could feel the balance in his body, the quiet readiness that came from years of discipline. The promise still held weight, but it felt strained now, stretched thin by circumstance. He knew that once crossed, that line could never be uncrossed. The realization sat heavily, pressing him toward a choice he had hoped never to face again. As the laughter continued, Leo remained still, eyes forward, breathing slow and deliberate. Inside, the conflict sharpened, promise against necessity, restraint against survival. He understood now that the past wasn't gone. It was waiting, patient, for the moment it was needed. The question was no longer whether he could keep his vow, but whether keeping it would cost him something even greater. And as Amina's voice rose again, taunting and fearless, Leo sensed that the answer was coming faster than he had ever imagined. A shaft of sunlight slipped between drifting clouds and caught Leo's hands as he rested them at his sides, revealing pale lines and faded marks that didn't belong to age alone. The camera lenses hovered there for a moment, drawn unconsciously to details no one had noticed before. His fingers were steady, veins pronounced, knuckles thickened by years of impact. The laughter softened slightly as eyes lingered, curiosity replacing certainty. Leo felt it, the shift from dismissal to confusion, as if the story they believed about him was beginning to crack. Amina waved the moment away with another laugh, louder than necessary, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Leo adjusted his stance again, subtle and precise, distributing his weight evenly without thinking. To trained eyes, it would have been obvious. To everyone else, it looked like nothing. The scars on his forearms peeked out as his sleeves shifted, each one a silent chapter of endurance and discipline. The crowd sensed something they couldn't name, and the noise thinned as unease crept in. The heat pressed down harder now, sweat tracing slow lines along Leo's temples as his breathing settled into a familiar rhythm. He could feel the space around him clearly, the distance to each person, the angles, the escape routes. These instincts surfaced uninvited, awakened by threat and proximity. The mockers leaned closer, phones still raised, unaware they were stepping into a zone Leo had mastered long ago. Suspense thickened, not through action, but through anticipation, as if the air itself was holding its breath. A friend laughed nervously and shifted position, breaking the tight circle for just a second. Leo noticed immediately. His eyes tracked the movement, calm but alert, scanning without turning his head. The scars along his collarbone showed briefly as he rolled his shoulders, the motion smooth, controlled. Amina scoffed, dismissing the moment, but her laughter sounded forced now. The idea that Leo might be more than he appeared flickered through the group, unsettling, unwelcome, and dangerously late. A faint murmur passed through the crowd, questions forming but left unspoken. Leo's presence felt heavier now, denser, as if something unseen had stepped forward in his place. He remembered the long nights of training, the pain endured in silence, the discipline that taught him when not to strike. Those lessons lived in his posture, his patience, his restraint. The audience sensed the tension rising, the feeling that they were standing too close to something powerful and unpredictable. Amina stepped closer again, lifting her chin defiantly, trying to reclaim control. Her confidence wavered as she glanced at Leo's hands, then quickly looked away. Leo met her gaze briefly, offering no challenge, no threat, only calm awareness. That calm unsettled her more than anger ever could. The laughter around them faded into scattered chuckles, unsure, cautious. Leo felt the edge drawing nearer, the moment when perception would give way to truth. As the sun dipped behind a passing cloud, the courtyard seemed to dim, shadows stretching across concrete and faces alike. Leo remained where he was, unmoving, every scar quietly telling its story without words. The crowd stood caught between curiosity and fear, still recording, still watching. They sensed it now, that the man they mocked was not fragile, not harmless, and not what he seemed. The question hung heavy in the air. If this was restraint, what would happen when it finally broke? A sudden shove cut through the uneasy silence, sharp and careless, sending Leo a half step back onto the hot concrete. The movement was meant to provoke laughter, to draw cheers from the watching phones, but instead it landed like a spark on dry ground. Dust rose around his feet as he regained balance effortlessly, eyes still calm. The crowd reacted with gasps and excited murmurs, sensing escalation. Leo felt the shift immediately. The moment when mockery stopped being noise and became danger, and when restraint began to cost more than it protected. Amina laughed loudly, clapping once, encouraging the recklessness like fuel poured on flame. Someone else reached out, fingers curling into Leo's collar, tugging hard enough to wrinkle fabric and invade space. The touch crossed something sacred. Leo's breathing slowed further, every muscle tightening beneath his skin without visible movement. His instincts surged forward, old and precise, demanding response. The phones zoomed in closer now, hungry for chaos, unaware they were witnessing the last seconds before control snapped. The heat intensified as bodies pressed nearer, excitement rippling through the group like electricity. Leo could feel the uneven rhythm of the crowd, the imbalance created by arrogance and alcohol-fueled confidence. His foot slid back slightly, finding traction. His shoulders loosened, not in fear, but in preparation. Years of discipline whispered instructions he had tried to silence for too long. He realized with sudden clarity that silence was no longer protection, it was permission, and that truth hardened his resolve. A sharp strike followed, careless and mocking, landing against Leo's shoulder. The impact echoed louder than expected, snapping attention inward. For a brief moment, everything slowed. The laughter, the recording, the city noise beyond the gate. Leo felt the line break cleanly, unmistakably. This was no longer about endurance or pride. This was about safety, dignity, and survival. His eyes lifted fully now, locking onto the space around him with cold focus. A hush spread unevenly as some laughter faltered, replaced by nervous chuckles. Amina's smile wavered as she sensed something had gone wrong. Leo straightened, rolling his neck once, the motion smooth and deliberate. The scars on his skin flexed with muscle memory long suppressed. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't shout. That restraint unsettled them more than rage ever could. The phones kept recording, capturing the moment before consequence arrived. The courtyard felt suddenly smaller, walls closing in as Leo shifted his weight evenly, grounding himself. His senses sharpened fully now, sound, distance, movement aligning into clarity. He saw fear flicker in one pair of eyes, doubt in another. The crowd realized too late that something irreversible had begun. Leo's calm wasn't submission. It was control. And control, once awakened, does not ask permission. As another hand reached out, bolder than the last, Leo moved his feet just enough to change everything. The laughter died abruptly, swallowed by tension so thick it pressed against chests. Amina opened her mouth to speak, to laugh it off, to regain control, but the moment had already passed her. The line had been crossed, and nothing said now could uncross it. What followed would not be accidental, and no one watching would ever forget how quickly power can change hands. A strange stillness settled over the courtyard, sudden and unnatural, as if the air itself had been commanded to stop. The laughter vanished mid-breath, leaving behind an uneasy quiet broken only by distant traffic beyond the gate. Leo stood centered in that silence, his posture subtly changed, spine straighter, feet planted with purpose. Phones remained raised, but no one spoke. The crowd sensed it instinctively, the moment when entertainment slipped into danger. Something unseen had shifted, and no one was sure whether to step forward or back. Heat clung to skin as Leo lifted his head fully, eyes sharp now, focused, no longer avoiding anyone's gaze. The calm on his face felt heavier than anger, more frightening than shouting. Amina swallowed hard, her earlier confidence faltering as the silence stretched. Her friends glanced at one another, unsure whether to laugh or retreat. The quiet grew louder with every second, amplifying heartbeats, breathing, and fear. Leo said nothing, yet his presence filled the space, demanding attention without a single word. A phone slipped slightly in someone's sweaty grip, nearly dropping before being caught again. The small sound echoed too loudly in the stillness. Leo noticed everything: the tremble in hands, the uneven spacing, the way bodies leaned back unconsciously. His senses locked in fully, years of discipline surfacing without effort. He felt balanced, centered, ready. The crowd mistook readiness for threat, and that misunderstanding tightened the tension further, pulling everyone deeper into a moment they could no longer escape. Amina forced a laugh, sharp and brittle, trying to break the silence, but it fell flat, swallowed by the weight of the moment. No one joined her. Leo's eyes flicked briefly in her direction, calm and assessing, not hostile. That look unsettled her more than any raised fist could have. She felt exposed, suddenly aware that control had slipped from her grasp. The silence pressed harder now, stripping away bravado and leaving uncertainty in its place. A breeze moved through the courtyard, lifting dust and cooling overheated skin, yet no one shifted. Leo inhaled deeply, grounding himself, feeling the familiar calm settle into his bones. He had been here before, this edge between restraint and action, where a single movement could change everything. The crowd felt it too, even if they didn't understand why. Fear crept in quietly, replacing mockery, as realization dawned that they were no longer watching a joke unfold. Someone took a step back, breaking formation, instinctively seeking distance. Another followed, then another, the circle loosening without a word spoken. Leo remained still, centered, letting the space open naturally. The phones stayed raised, but their purpose had shifted. From recording entertainment to capturing uncertainty. Amina's jaw tightened as she sensed the loss of control, her earlier dominance dissolving in the face of something she could not command. The silence stretched one final moment, heavy and absolute, before Leo's body made the smallest shift forward. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rushed. But it was deliberate. The crowd froze, breath caught, senses flaring. In that instant, everyone understood that whatever happened next would not be accidental or chaotic. It would be precise. The calm before revelation had passed, and the room waited, tense and helpless, for the truth to finally reveal itself. Leo moved without warning, not fast in a way that looked wild, but smooth in a way that felt unreal. 1 second he stood still, the next his body shifted as if guided by an invisible rhythm only he could hear. The motion was quiet, almost gentle, yet it cut through the air with purpose. A shadow crossed faces before minds could react. Phones kept recording, but hands trembled now. The crowd didn't yet understand what they were seeing, only that something irreversible had just begun. A body lunged toward Leo out of panic rather than courage, and he answered with precision, redirecting force instead of meeting it head-on. The movement was clean, efficient, controlled to the smallest detail. No wasted strength.
Norai.
The attacker stumbled back, shocked more than hurt, eyes wide with disbelief. Gasps rippled outward as people realized this wasn't luck. Leo's calm expression never changed, and that calm unsettled them more than violence ever could. Heat and dust swirled as another figure rushed in, driven by pride and the pressure of watching eyes. Leo pivoted, feet gliding across concrete as if he knew every crack by heart. A short burst of motion followed, sharp, decisive. And suddenly space opened where chaos had been. Someone fell hard, the sound echoing louder than expected. Phones tilted, scrambling to keep up. The crowd's excitement curdled into fear as confidence drained from faces that moments ago were laughing. Amina stepped back instinctively, her breath catching as she watched control slip away. Leo didn't chase. He didn't threaten. He simply stood where he was, letting the consequences of movement settle into the room. His posture spoke louder than words, balanced, grounded, unshaken. The realization crept in slowly for everyone watching. This wasn't a fight fueled by anger. It was discipline unfolding exactly as trained, and that made it far more terrifying. Another attempt came, desperate and reckless, and Leo answered with speed that felt almost unfair. A brief blur of motion, a sharp exhale, and then stillness again. The attacker dropped to a knee, stunned more than injured, clutching pride rather than pain. Silence followed, broken only by ragged breathing and distant traffic noise. The courtyard no longer felt like a stage. It felt like a lesson unfolding in real time. Sweat traced down Leo's temples, but his breathing remained steady, controlled, as if he were merely stretching after a long rest. He scanned the space calmly, not seeking dominance, only awareness. Those still standing hesitated, eyes darting between him and their phones, unsure whether to keep filming or to run. The balance of power had flipped completely, and everyone felt it settle heavily into their chests. Leo shifted once more, taking a single step forward, and the remaining crowd recoiled as one. Fear replaced mockery fully now, raw and undeniable. In that moment, They finally understood the truth they had laughed at. This man was not reacting. He was restraining himself. And if restraint looked like this, no one wanted to discover what lay beyond it. The truth surfaced quietly, not announced, but undeniable, settling into the courtyard like a heavy fog. Leo stood at the center, untouched, unshaken, while disbelief spread across faces that moments ago overflowed with confidence. Phones trembled in raised hands, still recording, but now with caution instead of excitement. The movements they had witnessed replayed in stunned minds, too precise, too controlled to be accidental. It dawned on them slowly that they hadn't provoked a weak man. They had awakened something disciplined, deliberate, and deeply dangerous. A hush returned, thicker than before, as someone whispered the realization out loud, not as an accusation, but as awe. The words spread through the crowd without shouting, passing from mouth to ear, reshaping fear into understanding. Leo felt it shift, the moment when mockery transformed into recognition. His posture remained calm, his gaze steady, neither proud nor apologetic. He wasn't claiming power, he was revealing it by no longer hiding. And that revelation unsettled everyone far more than any blow had. Amina's face drained of color as the truth finally reached her fully. The laughter she relied on as armor had vanished, leaving her exposed. She looked at Leo again, really looked this time, and saw what she had missed: the balance, the stillness, the restraint sharpened by years of control. Regret flickered briefly across her features, chased quickly by fear. The distance between them felt wider now than the courtyard itself, stretched by understanding that arrived too late. Leo shifted his gaze slowly across the crowd, meeting eyes one by one, not with threat, but with quiet certainty. Each person felt seen, measured, and found wanting. The phones that once fed on humiliation now captured humility instead, recording faces stiff with shock and shame. No one spoke. No one laughed. The truth had stripped the moment bare, revealing how quickly power changes when appearances collapse. The city noise beyond the gate drifted back into awareness. Horns, voices, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Inside the courtyard, however, time felt suspended. Leo exhaled slowly, feeling the tension ease just enough to breathe. He had not wanted this moment. He had avoided it for years. Yet here it was, unavoidable and final, reshaping how everyone would remember him from this point forward. Amina took an uncertain step backward, heels scraping softly against concrete. Her friends followed instinctively, creating space where none existed before. The authority she once wielded evaporated, replaced by silence and lowered eyes. Leo didn't move toward her. He didn't need to. The truth itself had done the work, settling heavily into the space between them like judgment. As realization spread fully, one undeniable fact anchored itself in every mind present. The man they mocked was not dangerous because he fought, but because he chose not to. And standing there now, calm and controlled, Leo understood that revelation carried a weight heavier than any strike. What followed would not be chaos, but consequence, and everyone sensed it coming. The crowd began to shift backward in uneven steps, confidence draining away with every movement. Those who had leaned in earlier now avoided eye contact, shoulders hunched, voices trapped in their throats. Phones lowered slowly, not out of respect, but fear of what the recordings now showed. Leo remained still, watching the reversal unfold without satisfaction. The hunters who once circled him now looked trapped themselves, caught by the consequences of their own boldness, unsure how to retreat without admitting defeat. One of the men who had laughed the loudest sat heavily on the ground, breath coming fast, eyes wide with shock rather than pain. Another leaned against the wall, shaking, replaying the moment his confidence shattered. The courtyard felt different, quieter, heavier, stripped of arrogance. Leo noticed the shift immediately, sensing how power drains when illusion breaks. He said nothing, allowing the silence to press harder than words ever could, forcing reflection where mockery once lived. Amina stood frozen near the veranda, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if to shrink from attention. Her friends avoided her gaze now, no longer feeding off her confidence. The authority she once wielded had vanished, replaced by uncertainty and shame. Leo glanced in her direction briefly, not with anger, but with disappointment that cut deeper. She felt it instantly, the weight of having crossed a line she could never fully erase. The phones that once chased humiliation now captured embarrassment, faces tight with regret, movements hesitant, laughter gone. Someone tried to speak, to laugh it off, but the sound died before it formed. Leo's calm presence held the space firmly, reminding everyone that restraint had limits. The realization settled in slowly. They had not been stopped by force alone, but by dignity refusing to be trampled any longer. A low murmur spread as onlookers processed what they had witnessed, piecing together fragments of truth too late. Whispers replaced laughter, each one carrying disbelief and self-reproach. Leo felt the tension ease slightly, though the consequences lingered. He hadn't come seeking victory, yet it had found him anyway, reshaping the balance of respect in the courtyard with quiet finality. Amina took another step back, eyes downcast now, her earlier boldness nowhere to be found. The friends who once crowded around her drifted away, leaving space where power used to stand. Leo remained grounded, neither advancing nor retreating, letting the lesson settle fully. He understood that humiliation, once turned inward, teaches more than punishment ever could. As the group dispersed slowly, wounded pride trailing behind them, Leo stayed where he was, calm and resolute. The hunters had become humbled witnesses to their own recklessness. The courtyard no longer echoed with laughter, but with quiet understanding. And as the silence deepened, everyone present sensed the same truth. This wasn't the end of the story, only the beginning of consequences that would follow them long after they walked away. The courtyard remained unusually quiet as the dust settled, the kind of quiet that lingers after something irreversible has happened. Leo stood in the same spot, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady, while the reality of the moment sank into everyone present. No one laughed now. No one filmed. The lesson had arrived without shouting or spectacle, and its weight pressed down harder than any blow. What they witnessed could not be edited, denied, or forgotten, and that realization settled deeply, changing how the space itself felt. Amina shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence replaced by a heaviness she could not shake. She avoided Leo's gaze, staring instead at the ground, as if answers might be written there. The family members nearby stood frozen, caught between shame and reflection. Leo noticed it all, the subtle collapse of arrogance, the dawning awareness that respect isn't demanded, it's earned. His silence continued to teach, louder now than any confrontation ever could. The heat of Lagos afternoon wrapped around them again, ordinary life creeping back in, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. Leo moved slowly, deliberately, picking up the small bag he had set down earlier. The simple action drew eyes, reminding everyone how easily they had dismissed him before. The contrast stung. What looked like weakness had been restraint. What they mocked as age had been wisdom. The lesson deepened with every quiet second. Amina's friends stood at a distance now, whispering softly, no longer bold enough to meet Leo's presence directly. Their laughter had turned into reflection, their confidence into caution. Leo felt no triumph, only a calm resolve settle in his chest. He hadn't wanted to teach anyone a lesson this way, but some truths refused to be learned gently. The understanding spread quietly through the group, reshaping how they would see strength from this day forward. Leo paused near the edge of the courtyard, sunlight catching his profile, casting long shadows across the ground. For a moment, it seemed as though he might speak, explain, or justify what had happened. He did none of that. His restraint after the fight carried more authority than any words ever could. The absence of explanation forced everyone to sit with their own guilt, their own assumptions, and the cost of underestimating someone they never tried to understand. Amina finally lifted her head, eyes tracing Leo's back as he moved away. Something inside her shifted. Not forgiveness yet, not courage, but awareness. She understood now that respect ignored has consequences, and that silence is not an invitation to cruelty. The realization hurt more than embarrassment, carving itself into memory where it would linger long after the crowd dispersed. As Leo stepped toward the gate, the city's noise rising again beyond the walls, the lesson settled completely into the space he left behind. No one spoke. No one moved. They stood with the weight of what they had witnessed, knowing it would follow them into future choices. The story had changed them, not through fear, but through truth, and that truth would not let them return to who they were before. The gate closed softly behind Leo, its metallic click swallowed by the rising sounds of Lagos returning to life. Traffic horns, distant voices, and he pressed back into the space he left, but something essential had changed inside the courtyard. The silence that followed him wasn't empty, it was reflective. Everyone stood still, replaying the same images in their minds, realizing that what they witnessed wasn't violence, but revelation. The moment had passed, yet its impact lingered, stretching far beyond the walls where it began. Amina remained where she was, staring at the ground, her thoughts loud despite the quiet. The laughter she once relied on felt foreign now, almost embarrassing. She understood, painfully, that respect isn't tied to youth, wealth, or volume. It is earned through humility and lost through arrogance. The memory of Leo's restraint weighed heavier than his movements because it exposed something uncomfortable, how easily she had mistaken silence for weakness and confidence for authority. The friends who once formed a loud circle slowly drifted apart, their conversations muted, uncertain. Phones slipped back into pockets, no longer tools of power but reminders of shame. Each person carried away a private reckoning, knowing the recording they feared most wasn't on a screen. It was in their memory. The echo of that realization followed them, reshaping how they would judge others long after this day faded. The courtyard itself seemed altered, like a place that had learned something the hard way. Sunlight stretched across the concrete, highlighting scuff marks and shadows where confidence once stood tall. The space remembered restraint, discipline, and the quiet strength that had filled it moments before. No one doubted now that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, patient and controlled, until forced to step forward. Leo walked on, unseen by those beyond the gate, returning to anonymity with the same calm he arrived with. He didn't carry pride from what happened, only certainty. He had crossed a line he avoided for years, not to dominate, but to defend dignity. The past had surfaced briefly, done what was necessary, and retreated again into silence, where it belonged. Behind him, the lessons settled fully into those who remained. Strength wasn't loud. Wisdom didn't need applause. And cruelty, when unchecked, always circles back on its source. The understanding arrived quietly, but it stayed, reshaping how respect would be given or withheld from that day forward. And long after the courtyard emptied, one truth echoed stronger than any laughter ever had. Never judge someone by the weakness you imagine. Some people carry power like a secret, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And when that power is finally forced into the open, it doesn't shout. It simply ends the joke forever. If you were the one that was humiliated in this video, and God being so kind later saved you from the hands of your enemies, what will be your reaction towards your oppressors? Comment and subscribe on this channel. Let us know your mind.